hearts all broke in Seattle when Yanni left, and maybe some of us, with it still being fresh, are still coping with that a little bit. But there's a new Yanni in town now, and what a debut it was for him. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken win 5-4 in overtime over the Montreal Canadiens, in a game that, well, as the Kraken have kind of made a habit of doing this season, turned out to be incredibly entertaining late in it as the Kraken come back to force that overtime. And although it was a 7:30 start, they didn't make us wait around too long. But we'll get to that in due time, as certainly the big story coming into the game was the NHL debut of Jani Nyman, who the Kraken called up from the Firebirds. The former second-round pick, the Kraken taking him with the 49th overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft, after they'd taken Shane Wright 4th overall and Jágr Furcus earlier in the same second round. And for Newman, he has been just playing fantastic over the last couple of years, lit it up in the Finnish Elite League at the top level last year, and then came over to play in the AHL with the Firebirds, where he got off to a bit of a slow start, but had been on absolute fire here recently, and earned that call-up, where he'll now get a chance to play, I would think, a few games at the NHL level before the end of the season, before going back to play the rest of the season and playoffs with the Firebirds, and then get a real chance at earning an NHL starting spot going into next season, depending how these few games go this year, but largely how training camp and the preseason go for him going into next season. And also what the rest of the roster looks like for the Kraken. But so far, so good. It was a very good NHL debut for him in the role that he got to play, which wasn't just a fourth-line role. The Kraken, I thought, at least on the Newman end of things, did a good job of making sure that he didn't just come in, play 5-6 minutes on that line with McCann and Burakovsky, the normal spot that they would have, right? He was playing a center spot on what's been, I think, their second line here recently, and he kind of got more third line minutes, but he still played just about 14 minutes in this game, and certainly earned quite a few of those. By which I mean, he was always going to get a certain amount of playing time, probably 8, 9, 10 minutes, and if things had not been going particularly well for the first period and a half, halfway through the game, if it was just clear that the game was still a little too fast for him and he needed to be eased in a little bit more, then he might not have gotten the full 14 minutes almost that he did end up getting. So I think the way that especially it looked like he was playing by the midpoint of the game, they were feeling comfortable with sending him out a little bit more throughout the rest of it. Now, I will say that the first couple of shifts that he had seemed a bit cautious, maybe even to the halfway point of the first period. It took him a little bit to ease into things, and not that the game was too fast for him and he was just kind of letting things happen around him. It just really seemed like, well, for one thing, I'm sure there's all kinds of nerves that he's having to work through in his first NHL minutes, especially for a 20-year-old coming up through having just been playing in Finland the previous year, then the AHL this year, and now here you are in the NHL less than a year after you hadn't even, I mean, he'd been to North America, but hadn't played in North America. So anyway, again, plenty that he's working through, and it's understandable that it would take him a little bit of time to warm up into things. In fact, it would have been understandable if it had taken this whole first game to warm up into things at the NHL level, but I don't know that it really took that. He seemed pretty comfortable by, well, kind of by the end of the first period, helped by the fact that the Kraken played a fantastic first period, getting into the game from a whole team perspective, with, again, the only change in the lineup for the Kraken being Newman stepping into it and taking the second line center role, the one that Wright normally has with McCann and Burakovsky on either side. And I promise we will get to the game here in a second, but it does lead to the one part of this whole situation with Newman's debut that I was not a particularly big fan of, and that is that with him taking Wright's spot on that second line, it bumps right down to the fourth line. And I perfectly understand the Newman side of things. I get why you want to put a guy that you see the potential for a top 6 role into the future, and this could be a big part of your team's future, why you wouldn't necessarily want to put him in his NHL debut into a fourth line role, and just he's not going to get a ton of offensive opportunities aside from maybe the power play opportunities that they were up front, that he was going to get those chances if the Kraken got power plays, which they do get a couple, and that turns out to be somewhat significant. But I mean, I get why you want him to be in a higher role, a more elevated role for the Kraken. That could be either second or third line. It has at times been hard to distinguish between the right line and the Stevenson line, which one is 2 and 3. They're kind of interchangeable, and really the reason I say right is the second line is because of how well that line has been playing, and it's because of especially how well that line has been playing, and a large part of that, if not the majority of it, being driven by how well Wright has been playing, that it just really feels crappy for Wright then to be bumped down to the fourth line, even if it's just for one game, especially with that one game being against the Habs. And I know that Wright would never say, certainly to media or fans or anything like that, that he particularly cares about playing against the Habs versus any other team. But I think there's still a piece of him that does care. I mean, he was hyped up to be the first overall pick that entire time. He was mentally prepared to go to Montreal, and I think he's happy in Seattle the way things have turned out. Things have certainly been going well for him here over the last couple of months, and he looks to be a big future of this franchise. But now he's in this game playing just over 10 minutes on the fourth line for the Kraken, even if it's circumstantial, while watching Slafkovsky, who was picked first overall by the Habs, play almost 19 minutes. So it's one game. Is it that big of a deal? No, probably not, but it just still feels kind of, I don't like it. I don't know, especially with how well Wright has been playing. Again, probably the best Kraken player here over the last month, maybe even two. To have him be the guy that has to take the big cut in playing time and go center the fourth line so that Newman can come make his NHL debut. Good for Newman. I just personally kind of wish that either they had found ways to get Wright some other shifts on other lines to get his ice time back up to kind of the 15 minutes that he's been getting, or, I mean, just have Stevenson take the hit, play the 10 minutes, and be the role player guy. I mean, he's not like he's going anywhere. His contract is massive. But anyway, all that being said, that out of the way, getting back to the game itself, the Kraken do absolutely dominate this first period. It's all Kraken pretty much the entire period. The Habs do get a couple shots on Decor, but nothing particularly dangerous. He really doesn't have to do much work at all throughout the first 20 minutes of this game. The Kraken really building off of that fantastic first period. Again, maybe their best first period of the season considering the opponent in DC against the Capitals in the previous game. And they, really play a very strong first period against a lesser opponent, which is, I mean, not really that much against the Habs. They've had a pretty decent season, certainly better than the Kraken season has been. It's just that, well, the Capitals have been right now the best team in the NHL, so for the Kraken to have played that well against them, this is just a furthering of that, and it does lead to the Kraken scoring the first goal, just like it did in DC. It comes about 5 minutes into the game. It's Eberle along the boards, does a good job of freezing a puck that the Habs are trying to clear up along the boards, kind of jumps, takes it off the glass, drops it to himself, and then fires a pass out to the high faceoff circle where Montour is dropped down into the play. He fires off the one-time shot and puts it over the pad into the far side of the net to give the Kraken that 1-0 lead. A little bit of a knuckling puck. They had a shot looking right as it comes towards the far post, and you can kind of see it like curve in like a slider. I mean, it's not a ball, so he doesn't have to put any spin on it, just kind of hits the flat spot and goes in. I don't know, just a random small thing I noticed on the replay about that particular shot, but it gives the Kraken the 1-0 lead and gives Montour his 14th of the season and also 4th goal against Montreal this season. Unfortunately, though, just like with the game in DC, although the Kraken do continue the momentum and, again, dominate this first period over Montreal, they only end up with the 1 goal out of it, including a number of other very good chances. In fact, a number of other chances better than the one that Montour scored on to give the Kraken the lead, including a couple that very nearly, if not for a couple more inches, would have ended up in the back of the net on a power play that the Kraken have late in the period. It just about ends the first period for the Kraken. The first of those off the post is a one-time shot from Newman and just a couple inches away from his first NHL goal. And not long after that is that first unit goes off, the second unit comes on. It's right with a redirected shot off the same post. That one stays out as well, and the Habs survive all of it, at least mostly anyway, to get to the second period just down 1 to the Kraken. Though at least early on in the second period, it didn't seem like it was going to matter as the Kraken pick up where they left off, getting right back into Montreal's end, and they do, after a few chances, end up finding the back of the net again. It's on a almost mirrored play to how they scored their first goal, but on the other side of the ice, with it being the second period. It's once again Eberle picking a puck off the boards from just above the goal line in the corner, kind of outside the face-off circle, and then firing it right out into the middle of the face-off circle, kind of out to the side by the slot, where this time it's Eeli Tolvanen rather than Montour that fires off the one-time shot. Well, for Tolvanen, not quite a one-time shot. He does have to handle the puck once to get it where he wants it, but he puts it into the net nonetheless to give the Kraken the 2-0 lead, Golvanen making his appearance. And as it turns out, he wouldn't be the only Finnish Kraken player that is a part of the organization thanks to the Nashville Predators that would end up scoring in this game. Which, as it turns out, would become important because after Golvanen gets his single-season career-high 19th of the season for the Kraken, they have their customary second-period collapse. Not long after the Habs get their first power play of the game, and not long into it, they end up scoring a one-timer from Laine, finds the back of the net, right after Forsland on the broadcast says that you have to watch out for Laine, who is a power play specialist. Well, he turns out to be a prophet as the Habs pull to within one. Then at 5-on-5, the Kraken, it's just a poorly played rush into their end. Both players end up getting past the Kraken defense. It's Laine this time on the passing end of things that gets past Beniers, and I think it was Montour. I can't remember who the defenseman was. Either way, he gets the pass along the goal line out to the other side of the crease where, having gotten past all of the Kraken to the back door first all alone, it's a tap-in goal for Newhook, who was the primary responsibility of Riker Evans, who for the Kraken had a pretty tough game. One of his certainly worst in a while, and it was not just this goal that does even things up, it was also the next goal that, now this one, a few minutes later, that gives Montreal the lead, coming all the way back from down 2-0 in just a few minutes to take a 3-2 lead. It's a nice shot, and also not particularly well played by Decord. It's an uncharacteristically poorly positioned play from Decord. He's just too far out of his net for this shot that comes kind of along the goal line. He gives a window for Slafkovsky to shoot at, and he puts it right into that window over the shoulder to get the lead. But at the same time, he once again was able to get open to get that shot off deep in the Kraken end because he got the puck and himself all the way around Riker Evans and got the step on him to have that open spot, open space, and time to pick his spot to take that shot. And with Decord giving him the spot, well, yeah. A lot of words to say that Evans doesn't play it well, Decord doesn't play it well, and as a result, Slafkovsky gets the goal, and the Montreal Canadiens get the lead. And not only do they get the lead, they also get a power play not long after. They get a couple chances on that. The Kraken, up to the task this time, do kill that one off, and we get to the third with the Kraken down 1, thanks to yet another collapse in the middle of a second period. But you know what? Honestly, that's okay. I mean, for one thing, if the Kraken do end up losing this game, it's kind of good for them in the long run. It gets them closer to those better odds at a good pick. But also there's the fact that, as predictable as a bad period from the Kraken, is a fantastic third period from them. That being said, it takes them a little while to get to that fantastic part of the third period, as they kind of just come out sluggish. They're really not pressing all that hard. They certainly can't get the transition game going whatsoever. Montreal seems to have settled into the game, and eventually they end up scoring again. This one, though, really shouldn't have counted. It's a shot from up by the blue line that is tipped in front of the net. Once again, it's Slafkovsky who's kind of just allowed to stand there in front of the net, not really all that challenged. I mean, the Kraken kind of push him around here and there, but he's kind of just allowed to stand there, puts his stick up in the air and whacks it down, deflecting it into the net. A shot that was going wide is deflected well into the far corner, but Slafkovsky doesn't really even celebrate all that much. He kind of just goes, "Yay, I did it." Because he knows, as well as now all of us, because we got to see the replay and see slow motion and freeze frames of it, like this one for example, that this was hit in with a high stick. It should never have been a goal. They do take it to review. The Kraken don't even have to challenge it. They go to official review. And somehow, with, I would have to assume, access to the replay that this screenshot came from, we're still unable to figure out that this was a high stick, in spite of, again, this screenshot showing that it's at least hit a foot above the crossbar. I took this down to the frame where the puck hit Slafkovsky's stick, and it's pretty clear. This is a camera that is specifically put in just about every NHL rink. I say just about because they don't always seem to be able to find this camera angle, but nonetheless, it's put there for this exact reason, so that if there's a point where you have to see if a stick hit a puck above the crossbar, it's at that same level, so you just look straight at the crossbar, and then look where the puck hit the stick, and sure enough, it's pretty clear. It's not even really all that close. This was definitely hit with a high stick, and never should have been a goal. Decord knew it right away, pleaded his case, and maybe that's why the officials ended up talking about it and taking it to review, but they still get it blatantly wrong with all of the chance in the world and obvious, clear evidence that it was not a goal to get it right. It still ends up being 4-2 Habs, which is still pretty frustrating considering how poorly officiated that has to be to get called that way. But I'd be a lot more angry about it and probably spend some more time ranting and yelling about it if it wasn't for, well, one, if the Kraken had still lost this game, it's technically better for them in the long run at this point, so I guess thanks for the help getting the better draft pick, but also the fact that the Kraken still managed to come back from it, and that comeback starts not that long after the Kraken get the first one. I guess you could even say get this goal back, a power play chance that they have just past the halfway point of this third period, actually getting into the later part of the third period. They get this power play, and it also leads to maybe the most exciting goal of the night, certainly one of the two most exciting goals of the night. On the power play, the Kraken do lose the zone, but come back into it quickly. Eberle traps the puck down along behind the net, just outside the trapezoid. I think he's kind of more in the corner. Either way, it doesn't take him long to find on the far side, wide open, having worked himself into some open ice. It's Yanni Newman who buries the one-time shot on the great pass from Eberle. Not a lot of chance for the goaltender, and the Kraken pull back to within one. Newman, in his first NHL game, gets his first NHL goal, the first Kraken player to do that. Beniers had an assist in his NHL debut, but no goal. So for Newman, a very exciting moment that as a franchise and fans will remember for quite some time. And for Newman, he'll remember for the rest of his life, his parents as well, who they showed on the broadcast, and his dad, who seemed to be trying to keep things together. Very emotional, understandably, with all of that going on. And whether it was the goal itself or the reaction from the fans in the building, which was very loud, not just for the goal, and it was a pretty full building as well, helped out in part, I would have to imagine, by it being Joey Daccord bobblehead night. But it was a loud pop for the goal itself, and then also very loud cheer for the goal announcement when that came. The Kraken respond on the ice, they start getting some momentum, and then as we get into the final couple minutes of the third period, the Kraken get another chance on the power play with just about 2:30 left. And then early on that power play, as soon as they're able to get hold of the offensive end, Daccord comes out, the sixth skater on the ice. And it is that sixth skater on the ice in Vince Dunn who gets into the offensive end. They pass the puck a couple of times and then pass it out to Dunn for the one-time shot off the stick of Beniers and into the back of the net to tie the game for the Kraken with still about 2 minutes left in the game. So it's not like it was fully over at that point, but you knew we were at least destined for overtime if the Kraken weren't going to finish it in regulation. For Beniers, it's his 16th of the season and the second power play goal for the Kraken in the period to complete the comeback and at least force those extra minutes. Well, it doesn't turn out to be minutes. We do end up getting to overtime. The Kraken admittedly do kind of flirt with disaster right at the end of the third period, but we get to overtime, and what on the clock says it could be 5 minutes turns out to not even be that many seconds, as off the face-off, the Kraken, and afterwards they said this was a set play between especially Montour and Stevenson. Basically, the Kraken saw that Montreal was coming up with all three guys up at the red line, which is not normally how you would set up overtime 3-on-3. You usually have the one defenseman back a little bit so that if the puck does get one back cleanly, then there's someone there to pick it up. And, you know, you prevent, say, an opposing player from jumping that face-off and going to get the puck behind all of you and getting a breakaway, which is exactly what Montour does. Stevenson, apparently, this is what Montour said, as soon as they saw them lining up like that, told Montour to be ready. He was going to make sure that that puck went backwards. And although on the replay, I watched it multiple times to make sure, Stevenson does kind of fake like he's going to win the faceoff back like you normally would. He very clearly lets up to let the Montreal player win it back clean, at which point Montour's gotten that step, and there were some Habs fans kind of, I don't know, let's say a little bit sour about the fact that Montour may have gotten a half step jump on that face-off, but I mean, I froze the frame, and Montour is still at least over the center ice line when the puck is on the ice. Then he gets one back, and Montour has that step. He gets to it first, skates in, and buries it for the overtime winner. All of that only takes 4 seconds. It took me a lot longer to describe it, but 4 seconds after the puck hits the ice, it's in the back of the net, and the Kraken have won this 5-4 in overtime. It's obviously a franchise record, having by 3 seconds beaten Benir's overtime winners back against the Capitals in his first season. But it not only beats that record, so franchise record for the Kraken, it also equals the NHL all-time record for fastest overtime goal, which, you say NHL all-time record for an overtime goal, that's really only going back to 2005, but still, a lot of overtimes. This is tied for the fastest any team has ever scored, and the Kraken, with that very exciting start to the comeback with the first ever goal in the first ever game for Newman, and then finishes with very quick overtime, which again with the 7:30 start was a very welcome surprise. Just a fun way for this game to end. The last few minutes, the Kraken, after collapsing in the second period in a few minutes, do it all in a few minutes in the third, and then a couple seconds in overtime. Another fantastic comeback late in the game for this team as they continue to further distance themselves as the best comeback team in the NHL. If only you got extra points for that, maybe they'd still be in the running for a playoff spot. But nonetheless, this, at least by itself, was still a very fun and exciting game from the Kraken. At least a fun and exciting first period, and then end of a third period anyway. And even if winning is still not the best thing for the Kraken at this point in time, technically speaking, I think there still is value in having games like this one in your own building in front of your own fans. And for the Kraken, they definitely gave a pretty much full building a very memorable game and a couple of very memorable moments at the end of it. Oh, and by the way, since I did mention with Golvanen's goal earlier on that was the first of 2 goals the Kraken scored in this game by a Finnish player that came to the Kraken courtesy of the Nashville Predators. Well, obviously, we know that the Kraken got Tolvanen off of waivers when the Predators waived him, and we're all very grateful for that. The other one, the only other Finnish player that scored in this game at all, was Jani Nyman, and he came to the Kraken via that second-round draft pick, which the Kraken got from the Nashville Predators in the inaugural season in the Jeremy Lauzon trade. So, well, Lauzon, thank you for this moment. I know you weren't always necessarily a fan favorite in Seattle, but, well, the second-round pick so far seems like it was well worth it. Anyway, with that, and since it's getting quite late or early, depending on how you look at it here, and I still have to get through editing and then wake up early, we're going to close things out on this game and the exciting end that it was with the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon, who help decide these 3 stars after every game, and you can be a part of that if you go to the link down below and support a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point, by going to Patreon and supporting there as well. It also gets you the chance to help decide the team awards for the channel anyway at the end of the season. And with the 3 stars in this game, I'm not really going to argue all that much with the 3 official stars. I mean, there's a discussion to be had with stars as whether or not it's necessarily the best player or the best story in any given game. And for this one, we'll go with a player that was very good and deserving of a star, but also was the best story. And that has to be Yanni Newman. He's going to get the first star for me with that first goal in his first NHL game. First star just makes a lot of sense, and he did get the first star officially. So yeah, why not? It all adds up. Played pretty well outside of that. Again, had the near miss in the first period on the power play, and that near miss off the post at the end of the first really seemed to at least build his confidence enough to where he came out in the second period and, I mean, looked pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that he was dramatically noticeable every single shift going on the rest of the game, but he certainly wasn't noticeable in a negative way at any point, and had some pretty good positive moments, had some good plays in the offensive end to get chances. Not all of them quite made it on net. He had a couple of good plays that were just blocked by Montreal players. Either way, generally a good NHL debut for him, punctuated by that goal that he gets to start the comeback for the Kraken late in the third. Then the second star, I will switch the two. It's 2 guys, and I don't know which I'm going to go with, but I'll go with Montour for the second star. They had Eberle as the second official star, and while I don't know that I necessarily massively disagree with that, Montour does have 4 points, gets that game winner 4 seconds into overtime, even if it was planned and set up by Stevenson. He's the one that finishes it. He also gets the 2 goals in this game, which now gives him 5 goals against the Montreal Canadiens this season, 5 of his 15 goals, which is a franchise record from a defenseman in a single season. So the Canadiens really helping out quite a bit with Montour's stats. He also gets 2 assists, so 4-point night, pretty good. And then the third star has got to be Jordan Eberle, 3 assists in this game, all of them primary assists, and just generally looking better and better every game, getting back to that great points production that he had early on in the season before the big injury. But as always though, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below about any part of this game, which moment you feel was bigger, if you want to try and choose between the first NHL goal for Newman or the record tying and franchise record setting overtime winner for Montour. Some fun moments and a generally fun game, even if it isn't productive in the tank for a better pick in this moment in time, but hard to complain too much. You either get to have fun or the Kraken get closer to a better pick. It's at least somewhat of a silver lining to the disappointment that is this season, which feels like a bad way to end a video about a game that was this much fun in the end, but here we are. Great game, a lot of fun. I'm getting rambly and my train of thought is all over the place. So let's end it. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.